After being at the center of a legal battle with Star Trek owners CBS, and being altered in accordance with the resulting CBS guidelines for fan films, Alec Peters Axanar is still moving forward under the direction of comic book creator Paul Jenkins. This, however, will be a different incarnation than the feature-length version of Axanar, which was originally planned. Prior to the CBS lawsuit, Axanar was to be written by Bill Hunt and directed by Meyer Burnett. After discussing the upcoming version of Axanar with Alec Peters in another video, we sat down with Meyer Burnett and Bill Hunt to discuss the Axanar that never came to pass.
So Robert, let's start with how you got involved with Axanar.
Well, as many know, I had spent 3 years working for CBS on the Star Trek The Next Generation Blu-rays, and that project was wrapping up, and Christian Gossett had talked to me about this. I'd known Christian for years. I was a huge fan of his. You know, he'd been to my house, and we always do Starship Smackdown at the San Diego Comic-Con together. And I was a big admirer of Christian's art and his production design work. I mean, I even ran into him. He was when I was working on the Chronicles of Narnia in New Zealand, I was taken into the secret room at the Weta workshop, the secret room where nobody gets to go in to see what they were doing. And Christian was just sitting there working. I had no idea he was in New Zealand. And I'm like, hey man, this was back in 2004. So Christian and I go way back, and I love the guy, and I think he's immensely talented. And he started telling me about Prelude Axanar, and he was telling me about Alec Peters, and I didn't know Alec. I'd heard about him because he had put on the Battlestar Galactica auction, and if you knew about Star Trek props and things like that, you couldn't not know about Alec. But I don't collect Star Trek props. I don't collect replica props from movies. I collect replicas because I'd rather have something that feels like it's from the 23rd century as opposed to being something that was screen used in a movie. I know that's a weird distinction. But so anyway, Christian wanted me to edit the movie, and it seemed like a good fit since I was editing Star Trek documentaries anyway. So it was kind of this neat meta thing to do, and I had nothing to do with the crowdfunding of that. And I said, sure, I'd come on board, and I also offered my services to do behind-the-scenes footage when they were shooting. And they crowdfunded the movie, and they asked for $10,000 and got $100,000, which was everybody was excited about, and they started putting together this production. And Christian, I was, again, one of his hires, and he had brought in Jennifer Weberly to produce and other people he knew from the Metamorphic production company. And it was a really incredible bunch of people. I had met Alec, and I really liked Alec, to be honest. I mean, he was passionate about Star Trek, and he loved Star Trek, and I loved listening to him talk about Star Trek, and we were like two peas in a pod. And it all felt like a great fit. Like, why wouldn't I want to work with these guys? And then Prelude to Axanar was shot. And I have to say, over the 2 days that took to shoot Prelude, and then they did a pickup day, but it was as professional a Hollywood production as I've ever seen. And I made a documentary that first appeared on the Blu-ray for Prelude, where I had interviewed all the cast while they were making the movie. Tony Todd, J.G. Hertzler, Richard Hatch, and they all talked about how professional the production was. They couldn't believe it. It was really run like a Hollywood production. And it was shot, and it went off without a hitch. You know, it took a while for Christian to pick his selects of what he wanted, and I basically started the process of editorial, and I was given a wide berth. Both Alec and Christian allowed me to sort of do what I did. So, you know, every director has his different style of editing. Some directors want you to cut, then they just want to come in and look. Some directors want to be there all day, every day. It was more like Christian wanted to see, once I got his selects, what I had come up with. And I was sort of, I cut their script, and their script was really verbose. So I started intercutting the various speeches the characters were given, which is what an editor does. And I said, we could probably use a narrator. And they came up with this idea of a narrator. And I said, well, wouldn't it be cool if this was somebody from Trek history? And I think it was Alec who said, oh, what if we made it John Gill? And I'm like, wow, that's cool. So it was really this sort of nice collaboration. And let me be clear, there was one day during the World Cup, and it was a Sunday, and I was hammered. I was wasted watching the World Cup, and we were supposed to work. Christian and I were supposed to work, and he always hammered me about this in interviews. And yes, I was very late to work, but I did come in. But yeah, I admit it, on a Sunday afternoon during the World Cup, I had a lot in my own cup to drink. And I'll admit that. That was one day. Then Mark Edward Lewis was doing the sound design, and I was even able to do things like, when I had cut the script together, they weren't happy with the fact that the Prelude really peaked with the speech that Ramirez gives. I do not fear the Klingon Empire. And they're like, can't we end the movie with that? And I'm like, well, that's not how you wrote it. I mean, there was this just long conversations about, well, that was Axanar leading all up to that. And they wanted a better ending. And I'm like, I have an idea. So they went away, and I recut their script and changed the ending around so we end with the D7 coming out. And then I said, well, I'll just ask Tobias to give me a shot of the D7, which he did. And I got to do other fun things. Like Tobias would send me iterations of shots, like 2 Arcana shots. There was an early shot and then a later shot. And he was like, you only used, Rob, only use the later shot. And I'm like, yeah, but why don't we use both shots and say that Arcanus developed over the years into this great, huge colony? And it was just more production value, and it was really cool. So I was asking for shots that Tobias had done of the Ares like 4 years previous to Prelude. And I would cut them all in. I'm like, I want every single piece of visual effects that we're getting. And like I cut things up. A lot of the effect shots were these long shots, so I just cut them into pieces. Because unlike what I was doing with them on the Axanar feature, the visual effects were done first, and they weren't done specifically to the script. The script was written, and the visual effects were already done. So I had to take the visual effects that were already done as this proof of concept and make them fit the script that they had shot. So for instance, they talk about these battles when they go to different, like Inverness and Cygnus 3. And the visual effects that I had, I'm like, okay, there's some visual effects with this blue tint and some visual effects with this copper tint. I'll take all the copper tinted shots and make that Inverness. And then I'll take all the blue tinted shots and those will be Cygnus 3, I guess. Because there were no effects that were done for the script, except the Klingon D6 crashing in the city. That was something Christian wanted because it was from World War II, from the Battle of Midway, where a plane crashes on the deck of an aircraft carrier. And he wanted Tobias to sort of recreate that. And then, of course, there was also the Into Darkness crash in San Francisco. So it was all, taken from all Star Trek history. And I had just a great time working with these guys. Now, keep in mind, everything that I did for Prelude to Axanar, I did with my own equipment, with my own cameras, and I wasn't paid to do it. And it was a lot of work. It was 2.5 months worth of work. And I get paid a lot of money to do this kind of thing. My DVD production work and my editorial production work, they got tens of thousands of dollars worth of work from me that they didn't pay for. But at the time, it was really fun, and it culminated with the premiere at the San Diego Comic-Con, where, Alec and Christian were at Comic-Con for 3 days already. I was at home with Bing Bailey because at the 11th hour, they weren't happy with Tommy Kraft's composites because he had put too much lens flare on them. Tommy Kraft redid all of the composites literally a week before our premiere. So I had to sit there and cut them in as we got them in, and then I had to go color time them with Bing Bailey, and that was a lot of work. So in the final week of Prelude, Bing Bailey and I, on the last day especially, we worked like a 36-hour, 40-hour day. And literally at 6 in the morning, the day of the Prelude premiere, I had to leave to catch a train to get to San Diego in time to get the Prelude DCP to the movie theater that was going to show it that night. Now, I just want to say that this was Bing and I. Christian and Alec were not there. And when Alec says things like, hey, Rob doesn't get the work done. Oh, yeah, I do. I get the work done. I'm always the last man out of the edit bay to bring whatever we need, whether the print was still wet in the days of prints. I got this DCP to our premiere, and if it wasn't for me, it never would have got there because I was the only one making sure that it did. But anyway, that said, we debuted it in a packed theater and, with its thunderous 5.1 surround sound mix. I mean, watching Prelude to Axanar in a movie theater, even I, who had been looking at it for 2.5 months, every single day for 2.5 months, I looked at this thing and worked on this thing, sitting there in that movie theater watching Prelude on a massive screen. When it was over, the audience was like, they were stunned because especially when you see it in a movie theater, it felt like a real Star Trek movie. And I'm sure a lot of detractors are like, it's not that good. But when you saw it in that theater, in that context, at that time, with those actors, and Alex Bornstein's incredible music, it was pretty incredible. And the response was just, people were just, they couldn't believe it. And, that was a joyous experience. Alec and Christian and I were all 3 peas in a pod. It couldn't have gone better. And it was like, hey, man, we did it. They came up with this thing. They raised the money. We went out and shot it. I cut it together. We had a world premiere at the San Diego Comic-Con in a giant movie theater on a huge screen. And it was great. I mean, ultimately, it went off without a hitch. And everybody did their part. Everybody did a great job. Christian certainly did a fantastic job directing the actors. I mean, one of the things that Christian doesn't get credit for is that when he was directing the actors, and it was really cool what he did, he was playing the character of the interviewer. Now, we never shot that side in Prelude, but he was acting as if he was an interviewer. So when the cameras were running on JG or Kate, Christian was playing opposite them and acting as if he were a memory alpha interviewer in the 23rd century, interviewing them for real. He was in character as the interviewer. And it was really cool because I think that's what got the performances. And I feel bad that I don't really have any behind the scenes. I mean, I do. I didn't use it in the documentary. I have a newer version of the documentary that one day I'll release, but it shows Christian doing this. And it was a really innovative way to go because I really think it helped the actors' performances. And so the idea that Christian didn't direct Prelude is ludicrous because not only was he directing, but he was also acting. You just didn't see him. And it was great. That's part of what made, you watch Gary Graham act and you watch JG act and Kate Vernon. I mean, the whole thing was a joy. I have nothing at all bad to say about Prelude Axanar. The entire experience and the final product, it started out as this thing. I'm like, well, that sounds cool. Maybe that'll be cool. I mean, I like to build Starship models on the weekends as a kid. And this to me was an extension of that. It was an extension of my lifelong Star Trek hobby. And then Prelude to Axanar stands as the ultimate culmination of my Star Trek hobby. I loved it. It was great. Then they used Prelude as the Kickstarter video that made $600,000 and everything started to change.
Let's move into Axanar. How was your experience there?
Well, here's the thing. Money changes everything, doesn't it? And suddenly, when you wind up with hundreds of thousands of dollars in your coffers, things start to change. I wanted to make movies since I was a little kid. And what I love about making movies, and what anybody who works in the entertainment business in any way, shape, or form should understand, is you have to love the process. You have to love the process of whatever it is that you're making, because once the process is over and you've released whatever it is that you're making, when it's released, you're not involved with it anymore. But many people get involved in the movie business because they think that they're going to be somehow changed on the inside by making movies, because we all love movies and we all believe that movies are sort of magic, and we think the people that make movies are magical beings. They're all, Gandalfs or something. And that's not the case. People are working hard every single day, and making movies doesn't make you better or worse than anybody else. Now, what happened is, with Axanar, the focus changed. And I was guilty of this too. When all of this money starts coming in, the thought was not about, okay, we're now going to make another movie. Let's start this process of making the movie. And in my mind, you keep all the same people. Like, you've already succeeded. So why wouldn't you use everybody the same? Just have the same team in place. You already have the great team in place. Let's go again. We're making the money. Let's start the process. And what the mistake I think that was made immediately was that wasn't what was first on the agenda. What was first on the agenda was this idea of getting a studio, and we're going to become the epicenter of all fan films, and we're going to remake Star Trek and this, that, and the other thing, and blah, 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 blah. And see, I wasn't in charge of the money, and my role would just be, again, to edit. I said, why don't we do like documentaries of the process? And Anna Alexander, who was going to play a big part in the movie, I made one of these videos. I made one production video where Christian and I and Anna went to Makeup Effects Lab, who did the Karn makeup and the Soval makeup in Prelude. And we went and I filmed a video of Anna Alexander getting her head cast. And it was really cool. We're in North Hollywood, and it was really fun, and we got all these people working on it, and we're just going to go right into making another movie. Well, then Alec wanted to be front and center of this. And the first thing he started doing was telling Christian that he wanted to get rid of the people that made Prelude. Why would you do that? Why would you want to take what is not broken and change it? Now, this is at the time above my pay grade. I had really no input. And Alec and I, by the way, have become pretty good friends. We hung out a lot. We talked a lot. We had lunch a lot of sushi. It was fun. I enjoyed it all. But in my mind, it didn't make sense to me that we would change the production up, because I'd been involved in production for 20 plus years at this point. And Christian was obviously distressed about what was going on. And Alec was talking about getting a studio facility that would be our own. And that excited me. I'm like, really? That sounds good to me. In my mind, I thought what Alec was talking about was what Francis Coppola wanted to do with American Zoetrope back in the day, which was we'd have an epicenter or a hub where all this filmmaking activity could happen. And I'm thinking, yeah, anybody who wanted to come in and make films, and we'd have a place to do it and a base camp and all that. But then the rift between Christian and Alec started to happen. And Alec, he wanted to be front and center. And to my mind, as I've told anybody who knows me for any length of time, The project itself is the locomotive, is the engine that pulls you as the caboose down the tracks of your own destiny. So if you start putting yourself in front of the project you're working on, you'll never win because the engine will not work. Eventually it's going to burn out and the project needs to be front and center. Also, another mistake is that all this money that came in for Axanar was now Alec's money. It wasn't the project's money. If it was the project's money, if I was in charge, I would have hired a production accountant. I would have had all the money put in an escrow account or whatever, and it would have been overseen by the production accountant. Because with that much money, you know, with donors sending you, I mean, we're making hundreds of thousands of dollars, you got to be accountable. Like every cent needs to be accounted for. That's a big deal because you have to know how much money you have all the time. And the whole point was we were tasked with one job. We now had to make an Axanar feature film. That was it. That was what they paid for. And I know Alec did state in the first Kickstarter for the movie that we were going to have a production facility and all of that. And it's in there, which is true, but there was never a budget. When we started out, when we made this money, there was no production budget because there was no finished script. And certainly there was no budget based on what kind of a production facility we were going to get. There was nothing. And that was another thing. You can't make a movie without a budget. You can't make a movie without a finished script. You know, all of the tight things that were in place for Prelude to Axanar were not in place for this Axanar feature film. And they should have been before any dollar was spent. Then of Charlie de Lazarica and myself, we were begging Christian to stay with the project. But I mean, how would you feel if you're Christian Gossett and you've brought all these production people in, including, by the way, me, and Alec's firing them? A director is only as good as his support staff, and Christian's support staff was being dismissed. All the people that he brought on the project were being let go by Alec. And imagine how he felt and what the position he was put in. So Christian eventually left the project, and that led me to sort of take over. And again, what was my motivation? My motivation was I wanted to fucking make a Star Trek movie, man. I wanted to make an epic Star Trek movie on a not epic budget and prove it could be done. We did it with Prelude, and that was my only motivation. I'm like, this is cool, and I won't lie. I was going to get to make a Star Trek feature film, which is a dream since I had as a little kid. That's what I wanted to do. Now, it also was, you know, having a studio, I'm not going to lie, that was also attractive. To have a place to work out of, a facility where I could have an office and all of these things. But I just assumed that, again, I didn't see the books. You know, I didn't know what was going on with the cash. And I just went on. My next project was I was making, the donors paid for a Blu-ray. So I brought all of my Blu-ray experience to bear, and I created what I thought was a pretty kick-ass Blu-ray. I did a 45-minute making of documentary. I recorded 2 audio commentaries. I oversaw the authoring and the development of menus. Then I ran a contest with our donors and fans for the artwork for the Blu-ray. And a guy named Ron Gamble won. And it's a great, beautiful piece of artwork. It's very graphic and sort of Saul Bass-esque. And I spent months working on that Blu-ray, and I did tens of thousands of dollars worth of work. I mean, between the Blu-ray and my work on Prelude as the editor, it was easily $100,000 worth of work, of which I received not a dime officially. And then Christian left the project. I had to take over, and Alex said I was being tested. It was my idea that if we were going to raise more money, that we would do a scene. We already showed people we can have people sitting in a chair talking against a green screen. But I was like, okay, how can we create a whole environment in a green screen where actors can actually interact? Can we do that? And I said, we have to do that. Now, before Christian left, we were prepping the Vulcan scene. At first, as originally written, it was like in a room where these 2 actors were talking. And then I was like, no, we got to get out. We were scouting. I have video of us scouting locations up in the mountains where there's a water reclamation plant, and Christian wasn't happy. And I think he wasn't settling on something because his relationship with Alec was deteriorating. So we were going on these scouts, and I was of course involved with all that. I was shooting it all for my behind the scenes documentary I wanted to make on the making of Axanar. And I was doing all of that. And then it was eventually when Christian left, I sort of continued the work that was all done. And it was my suggestion. I'm like, you know, we don't have to go on location, even though I would love to have gone on location. And there were places that we saw that would have worked. I wanted to do this walk and talk. I said, I want to do a walk and talk where people are talking to characters. Soval and this Vulcan ambassador are talking. And we can show that we can create a virtual environment, a believable virtual environment that they can interact in. And it will show that we can make a feature film-esque scene. So that's what the Vulcan scene was supposed to be. And at the time, I was editing a feature film called Paradox that's on Netflix now that you can see. And I wasn't happy with the script of the Vulcan scene. I didn't like the way it was written. So I took a few passes and I wasn't happy with what I was doing. And I asked Alec if I could bring someone in to help me. I brought in Bill Hunt, who basically, with me, we rewrote the Vulcan scene a lot of times. And we got it to a place that I thought was really cool. You know, that I wanted to create this character, Talera, that was first introduced in the Star Trek novel Strangers from the Sky. And I wanted this idea that Soval, it's never said in the Vulcan scene, but Soval and Talera are married. They're husband and wife, but you weren't going to reveal that until the end of the movie. And so I asked Bill to come in, and Bill started rewriting the script with me to make it what I thought would be better. And that's how we began our association.
I actually knew Alec before I got involved with Axanar, and the way I knew is that Charles de la Zurica and I, who's a friend and a Blu-ray producer, we went to the PropWorks auction where he was selling all of the Battlestar Galactica props. You know, as fans of the show, we wanted to see the props up close and get a look at the ships and all that kind of stuff. And I also wanted to buy a set of the screen-used patches that they used on the show because in addition to being the editor of the Digital Bits, a side interest of mine is I've always been fascinated with spaceflight, and I actually have sort of one of the best collections of manned spaceflight patches on the planet. and I'm fictional patches, some of the actual ones also from NASA and the Russian program. And so I'm also kind of known online as a historian of the subject. So I went to go buy a set of these patches, and I ultimately did win at the auction and buy a set. And it turned out that Alec, his warehouse where he was operating PropWorks from was here in Orange County, not that far away from my house. So when I went to go pick up the patches one day and, walked in there, and it's a small little space, kind of in a strip mall, but everywhere around the office were these incredible Star Trek props from the show, from the films. They were just all on display everywhere. And right in the middle of the floor was a huge crate in which the Nebula class cruiser starship model from The Next Generation was just sitting there. And it was extraordinary. He gave me a tour of this place and met his people that were working for him, Curtis Short and these people that were working for him. And then we all went to lunch. And so at lunch, we're just kind of chatting and catching up and talking about geek stuff. And Alec happened to mention that, that he was a big fan of these Star Trek fan films, and that he really liked the character of Garth of Izar from the original series, and that he and his friend Christian Gossett were working on the script for a fan film of their own. And he talked about Prelude to Axanar. He talked about the process of that, and he also showed me when he was working on the script for the Axanar feature film, because after Prelude was done, he wanted to do a feature film with the character. And the whole idea of Prelude was that it was going to be like a test case to raise money to make the film. So he asked me to read the script, and so I read it and, kind of gave him, obviously I know a lot about space flight and science things, and I gave him some notes on that sort of thing. And that was pretty much it. And then when they had their premiere down at Comic-Con, Alec invited me, and so my wife and I were there, and it was tremendous. I was really impressed with the whole process. And because of my work on the Digital Bits as the editor of the Bits, I knew Gary Ross, who was in charge of CBS Home Entertainment at the time. And Gary was at the after party, and we were talking, and there was a lot of optimism, and it was clear that Prelude was a huge success in that they were going to be able to raise the money to do a film. Of course, Rob was there, and I'd known Rob for 20 years, obviously, as the editor of the Bits. I've been covering Blu-ray and DVD for a long, long time, and had met Rob many times over the years in his capacity as a Blu-ray producer and documentary producer. And I got invited up to the studio a couple times. Let me just interject. Bill used to have me on his panels all through the aughts at the San Diego Comic-Con every year discussing physical media, and I was even able to bring some exclusive video, one of Bryan Singer on the set of Superman Returns, Hills Run Red. So over the years, Bill and I had a long association, and Bill was incredibly supportive of my documentary work.
So we weren't just pals. I mean, we had a professional association as well, which was I can't thank Bill enough for his support of my DVD work over the years.
Well, and that's the thing, is it's been great. I mean, we knew each other, so there was a perfect kind of a natural fit there, a kind of a kinship. And this was right about the time that, as Rob said, that Christian left the project. And I didn't know Christian. I'd only met him a couple of times. I knew him from his comic book work, The Red Star and things like that, but didn't really have any idea of what was going on with that. But, Rob and I were talking about the project, and I was occasionally talking with Alec about it too. And Rob knew that I'd given some notes to Alec about the script, that kind of thing. So the next thing that happens is I knew they were getting ready to shoot the Vulcan scene, and I think it was one evening about 3 or 4 days before they were going to actually shoot the Vulcan scene. I get a call from Rob in the evening, and he said they were at a costume fitting at Western Costume that day with Gary Graham and the actress who was going to play Talera. And Gary kind of came up to him privately and said, "I don't understand the script for the scene. I this is my character Soval that I've obviously played many times, but I don't recognize the character. I don't understand who these two characters are to each other, what the relationship is, what they're trying to get, what the purpose of the scene is. It makes no sense." And, so Rob had been trying to kind of rewrite the scene, and Rob knew that I was an Enterprise fan. I'm one of the few people who actually really quite liked Enterprise. And so he wanted to ask my input, and I said, well, let me think about this. I mean, would you like me to maybe take a pass at the scene? Because I've obviously been a writer for, 20 years on the bits and understand story and that kind of thing, and knew the characters well. And so I went away, and that night I spent like 3-4 hours and rewrote the scene. And Rob and I kind of went back and forth a few times and kind of nail it. But when it went back to Rob, Rob sent it out to Alec and to Gary, and I think Alec wasn't necessarily thrilled, but Gary loved it. Gary was absolutely thrilled with the scene, and so that's what we ended up using. And I was invited to be on the set during the Vulcan scene production, and Gary came up and said some very nice things to me, and it went off without a hitch, and it was terrific. And at the end of that process, that night, we were at a restaurant having drinks and dinner and kind of celebrating a great shoot. And Rob leaned over and says, "You know what I'm going to ask you next, right? I want you to rewrite the whole script." That's really how I got involved.
But then what happened after you signed on to rewrite the entire script from page 1? How did things develop from there?
Well, there were basically two things that I needed to do as the now director of Axanar after the Vulcan scene, which, by the way, also went off without a hitch. The Vulcan scene, we shot it in a day. We finished early. Working with Tobias was a joy because I had sent him animatics that I had shot of my action figures. To give it as much production value as possible, it was my idea to shoot natural sunlight. Because if we were just in a green screen stage and they're supposed to be outside, it's very difficult to make that lighting unless you have a really skilled. I think Milton could probably have done it, but just to make everything easier on what it was we were trying to do. Actually, in the long run, it probably, if we had a great studio, it would have been probably easier, but it turned out great. I mean, it went off without a hitch. Working with Tobias was a joy. I was able to get even small production mistakes that we had made because I was shooting and sometimes the ponytail on Talera's head had to be moved from right to left. And it was crazy stuff that Tobias ended up having to do, but it worked out really well. And I was extremely proud of the team in making the Vulcan scene. Alexander Bornstein did a great job scoring it. Tobias's visual effects were beautiful. I got to put in things like both the animated series and dealing with Shakar and putting in Mount Salea and all that. All the stuff that I wanted to do was done. And then Tobias, knocked it out of the park, and I figured, hey, great.
From a story standpoint, the interesting thing about the scene is that it shows Soval's character development, because he starts out at the beginning of Enterprise. He starts out very adversarial to the idea of humans moving out into the galaxy. And by the end of Enterprise, he's come to see the value of humanity and humanity's role in bringing together the coalition of planets and bringing together, all of those disparate races, uniting them in a common goal and against larger enemies, the Romulans and Klingons and things like that. And, obviously Axanar is set about 80 years after the original series. And so what I wanted to show is that not only has he come around to humanity.
It's 80 years after Enterprise.
80 years after Enterprise, yes, thank you. Yeah, it's about 15 years, I think, before the original series. So Soval by this time is now, not only is he an advocate of humanity, he is the staunchest advocate of the Federation. He has taken over that role from Captain Archer, who in Trek canon went on to become the first president of the United Federation of Planets and the head of Starfleet. But he's now in that position of being the staunchest advocate for the Federation. So he's fighting for the Federation, even as Vulcan is threatening to break away from the Federation because of this Klingon conflict. And I wanted to show him he's in that role now. He is the advocate. He is fighting to keep the Federation together, and that idea then motivates his entire presence throughout the script and grounds the whole idea of the relationship between the Federation and Vulcan and the motivation for all the conflict with the Klingons. It was key, but figuring that out was very much about showing how this character had grown in the 80 years since Enterprise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But then what I knew, I was going to say the two things I needed to do as far as moving forward, I knew that Alec could not play Garth. We had to recast because he was the focus of the script. And Alec, I mean, I don't think it's disparaging to say Alec Peters is not a very good actor. It's not something he specialized in. It was something he dabbled in. And it's fine when we were cutting around him in Prelude. But I mean, I saw his entire performance on Prelude. There's no way he could carry a feature. I mean, it's just academic. And
it's not lack of talent. What it is lack of experience. It's really, a good television actor, a good film actor has been doing it for years and years and has that benefit of that experience to draw upon. And Alec, he'd certainly taken acting classes and he was giving it all he had, but he didn't have the experience to stand up with the other actors.
Right. And I would dare say he doesn't have the talent either, because you have to be a certain kind of a person to be a great actor. And I just don't think that Alec is the kind of a person. He's a different kind of a person. He's not an actor. So in order to make an effective feature as the director of the film, look, one of the things a film director does, one of the first jobs of a film director artistically is to cast your movie properly. And I knew we had to get rid of Alec as the lead. And by the way, eventually he agreed to step back. As the project became more and more prestigious as we went along, he did, to his credit, he did agree to step back. And I give him all the credit in the world for that. The second thing I needed to do was the script was a mess. It was very much a script that was just all space battles, and we had to inject it with a certain amount of depth. If Bill and I had our druthers, we would have completely rewritten the story. I would have told a completely different story, but we had this skeleton of a script. We had to stick with that. I knew that I wasn't going to get away with doing a page one rewrite of the script. That would have been a battle I would never have won. It would have just gotten ugly, like so many battles making this movie did get, in fact. So I just said to Bill, I'm like, you know what, dude? Why don't you just start rewriting the script, and I'll figure out a way to sort of tell Alec that you're doing this. And this went on for a long time.
Well, and I can tell you that, so part of the challenge was that, as Rob said, the script was just unfilmable. It just wasn't ready. It was about 3/4 written, but it was improperly formatted. It was being written as an hour-long television episode with a teaser and 5 acts or teaser and 4 acts, but it was essentially a feature film. And so it wasn't structured properly. It wasn't finished. And the nature of the story was, it was essentially, if you've seen the movie Midway, it was essentially the movie Midway with a scene from Ice Station Zebra, like, dropped right in the middle of it. And that was it. There were no character arcs at all. Garth was on every page. And unfortunately, Garth is a Mary Sue in the script. He is very much, he never makes a mistake. He never fails. His genius pulls off every battle. The only other character that was really well developed at all in the script, other than Garth, was Karn. But neither Garth or Karn had character arcs, and all of the other characters, the bridge crew and Chang and Soval, they appeared in one scene and then they were gone. And so there was no kind of continuity. The ticking clock aspect of this was that at the time that Rob asked me this, they were thought to be 6 to 8 weeks away from filming. And they were already casting. They were already building sets. We were pretty much locked into the story. So I had to figure out a way to make that story work and to make it into a coherent, narrative drama. So the first thing I had to do was figure out what are the motivations. Why does this conflict happen? Because nobody knew. Nobody had ever thought about that. And what I realized the key was, is having worked on the Vulcan scene, is that in Enterprise, there's a constant theme throughout the show, which is that Archer always wanted to explore. His whole goal, Starfleet, they always wanted to be explorers, but they ended up having to be diplomats and warriors. So if you look at the end of Enterprise, where that's going is it's going toward the Romulan War, and it's going toward the founding of the Federation. So my idea was, after the Federation is founded, suddenly Starfleet can get back to what it always wanted to do. They can go out and be explorers. So you have an 80-year period of time, which is a golden age of exploration. And it's that very success of the Federation going out and exploring and bringing more members into the Federation and, pushing the boundaries of pushing the frontier of space. It's that very success that the Klingons see as a threat. And so that's what motivates the conflict. So then I was able to look at, okay, if you look at the two sides, the Federation side, you've got Soval becomes a much more active character, and I can bring him into the whole script and make him an active hand from start to finish. And he's the sort of wise, sage character who's been giving advice that Starfleet didn't listen to, which triggered the conflict, and now he's trying to keep it all together. So it makes the Federation side much more complex. And then on the Klingon side, I introduced this idea. I made Chang a much more a bigger character, because he was barely in the script too. And it's like, this is Chang from Star Trek VI, right? And we know where he's going to go. So then suddenly it became interesting, because there became a generational struggle on the Klingon side to define the meaning of honor. So you had three characters on that side. You had Karn, who's the main sort of nemesis, but he is very much the last of a dying breed of Klingons who really believe in the idea of honor, this sort of noble warrior poet Klingons. Whereas Chang represents this new young breed for whom honor is whatever it takes to win. Doesn't matter what you have to do, who you have to slaughter, who you have to enslave. It's winning at all costs. And so and then you've got Karn's mentor Moreau, who was this idea that goes back to the pocket novels of the war, the sort of warrior, the thought admirals, the warrior.
The final
poet.
reflection.
The final reflection, exactly right. And it's this idea of this order of Klingons who really believed in the idea of honor. And so then all of a sudden you've got history, and you've got direction for both sides of the conflict. And then from there, it's a matter of I expanded Soval's role out, made him an active hand throughout the entire script. I expanded Chang's role out, made him an active hand throughout the entire script. And then I brought all of the other characters in, including created many of those characters, gave them histories of the bridge crews, the various, the Federation president, all these various characters who populate the script, who were basically they were just stock. I mean, they were just names on a page. They all served to show how awesome Garth was, and then disappeared. I gave them all histories. I gave them all arcs, and I tried to make the script, as Rob and I had talked about this. It's make it much more of an ensemble. So the whole cast, the whole film is a much more of an ensemble cast, which then alleviates the pressure on Garth, so Garth doesn't have to carry every scene. And then a challenge was, because Garth was such a Mary Sue, I had to figure out how to make Garth, how to give him a character arc at all. Because in the outline, in the story as it existed, he won every engagement. He was awesome, and he won everything. And so then it's like, okay, the only way to do that is I start him in a much, much darker place, and make sure that, yes, he might technically win every engagement with the Klingons, but each engagement has a cost. And over the course of the script, those costs get higher and higher. It starts with he's lost some crewmen at the beginning of the script. In the battle, what was the name of the battle from The Trouble with Tribbles that's mentioned in Trouble Tribbles, Rob?
Donatra?
Yeah, Donatu, I think, isn't it?
Donatu, right.
Donatu. Yeah,
Donatu, yeah. Donatra is from Star Trek Nemesis.
Right.
It's Donatu 5 or whatever.
Donatu, right, exactly. So they've just come from that battle, which was a draw, and in that battle, Garth and the Ares crew lost a bunch of crewmen. So that's weighing heavily on him. And then in each subsequent engagement, he loses people. In the first major battle that the crew has with a D7, the ship is so badly damaged, the Ares, that it can't be used in the final battle. So Garth has to go back to his original ship, which from Star Trek canon fans know is different. What was the name of the ship again, Rob?
The Xenophon. And
the
remember,
Xenophon.
That was an idea that I had run by you.
Yes, yes.
And I was, because what was great is, like, I didn't do any writing on the script I didn't do any actual writing, but Bill and I would talk about this stuff, and I would just throw out these ideas, and then Bill would craft them.
Well, and it was the idea that Rob had about the Xenophon was great, because he had the idea that what if Starfleet ships have a modular design? So you've got this old ship, the Xenophon, that used to be Garth's ship, that is in dry dock, and Starfleet has upgraded it by taking a new Ares-class bridge and plugging it into the structure of the ship. So now suddenly we can use the same set. We can redress it a little bit, but we can use the same ship. So this final big battle that has to be fought at Axanar is he's in a less powerful ship. He's in the ship that it was his, that he spent years exploring in. So it was all this kind of stuff that we're sort of bringing to it. And in the final battle, then he loses his best friend, who has been his first officer for years and years. So there are consequences at every step of the way. And by the end of this thing, Garth really now realizes, the cost of being a Starfleet captain.
And also,
go ahead.
Well, I wanted to step in and say one of the things that I loved about this is a lot of these ideas, like the modular bridge, that they could literally pull out the bridge of a starship and then drop in a newer bridge. I stole that from the Star Trek novel Black Fire by Sonny Cooper. And I love Star Trek novels, and I've collected them all, and I haven't read them all but I have most of them. And one of the things I've always loved about the Star Trek novels is that the people writing them were writing them because they loved Star Trek, and they spent a lot of time thinking about the Star Trek universe and making sense of it. So I've never understood, and I've lived in this world, and it's been sort of it's constantly it constantly angers me that over the course of almost 50 years, there are literally thousands of pages of great ideas about the Star Trek universe that are owned by CBS that anybody could plunder to advance canon, to advance the nature of the Star Trek universe and make it a lot more coherent. And every time there's been from the beginning of Next Generation onward to now Discovery, the most egregious the most egregious criminal use of the Star Trek universe yet. It's always bothered me that there's been so many great ideas that have been put forth that should be incorporated into Star Trek canon that have already existed and have already been put into canon by the authors of these novels, that whenever we could plunder those ideas and sort of shape Star Trek canon and come up with these good ideas, I would always want to inject those into the script. And if I might say one more thing, I always wondered, how does Garth as an explorer, the greatest explorer, the explorer that found the most planets, how does he become a General Patton? In my mind, and I would tell Bill this, I'm like, what if his knowledge of astronavigation or astrophysics or exploring all of the knowledge he's acquired as an explorer, the best Starfleet explorer that there ever was, what if he uses all of that knowledge in battle? So he's applying scientific concepts and he's applying things about astronavigation to his fighting style, so to speak. And that's what makes him a dangerous commander. And he hates that. He hates killing people. He's like, the Klingons are a spacefaring race. They've been around longer than humanity. Why would we ever, every life that is lost in this conflict is a loss for the galaxy? And he's somebody and it's this thing that ultimately would be the seeds of what drives him mad later in life. I mean, it was subtle, but it was something I definitely wanted to inject. And you would see that again in the performance of the actor. And anyway, I just want to inject that.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. And then we made very sure to go into the script. One of the last things we did was to add lots of connective tissue to embed this film Axanar into the Star Trek lore. So there's all these little touches. I mean, there's a scene that takes place at the 602 Club, which was a location from Enterprise. And the reason it was called the 602 Club was because Star Trek producer Rick Berman was an alumnus of the University of Wisconsin in Madison, which is where I graduated from college. And there is a real place called the 602 Club, and it was called that because it was on 602 University Avenue, called the 602 Club. And the guy there, the proprietor for years and years and years, was this guy named Dudley Howe. And it was this just really awesome bohemian bar where all kinds of like people would get together and talk about literature and society and politics and philosophy. And it was just this great place. And it was still there when I was going to school there. So I'd been there a few times. So I dropped that in and I mentioned Howe as the proprietor of the place. We had, at the beginning of the script, when Karn and Chang are going through the rubble of this Federation colony, Karn picks up a child's toy, which is a model of the NX, Doug Drexler's NX refit starship, which the name on the hull, it would have been a quick throwaway thing, but the name on the hull, it was the Endeavor, which in the continuation books for Enterprise was T'Pol's ship, the ship she captained. We added Dr. Daystrom makes an appearance as he's trying to decode the D7 plans. Soval hands off his role as Earth ambassador to a very young Sarek in one scene in the script. Captain Pike, who appears in the script, makes a reference to the Old Man and Professor Kenmore, which is a reference to Archer and Trip, who at this time in Star Trek history are still alive. They're very old, but they're still alive. We even had in the battle at the end, we had Captain Robau was one of the fleet captains. Robau being the captain of the USS Kelvin from Star Trek 2009. And the reason that works is because even though those films, the Abrams films, splits off into its own timeline, the existence of the Kelvin and Captain Robau are part of the Prime timeline up to that point. So this is 10 years later.
Or are they? Just kidding. Right. I just thought I'd inject that. Come on.
Right. Yeah, if you hadn't, I would. So, yeah.
I watch your videos.
Yeah, and again, as Rob said, like we were stuck with the fact that we had to use this existing outline. Rob and I had the challenge of writing a completely original Star Trek script. It would never have been a war story. It would have been a classic science fiction exploration story, and of the kind that Starfleet or Star Trek is about. But we didn't have that. We didn't have that luxury. The challenge was to take the existing script and make it work as quickly as we possibly could.
But regardless of script, something else happened outside of the production. CBS entered a lawsuit. What can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, here's something ironic. We were ramping up to production at this point. We were deep into casting people. I mean, I'm not going to say who it is, but the person we'd cast as the Federation president was an actress who was in one of my favorite science fiction movies of all time. I'm not going to say what that is. It's not a well-known movie. But Christine Sheeks, our casting director who'd cast the movie Boogie Nights, we were out all over town looking for people. We were taking meetings with some great actors. A favorite actor of mine came to the studio and he wanted to play a part, and it was coming together. For the Christmas season, I went and I made a holiday greeting video that Bill is in. Bill actually shot his own footage. He had sent it to me. Tobias was in it. Diana was in it. Milton Santiago was in it. Alec was in it. Everybody that was working, Dean was in it. Ben Ralston was in it. Ben Ralston just was the production designer of this other short film that I just finished. So I made this video to thank the donors, and that it was to celebrate all this work that has been done. The sets were being painted, the Klingon costumes had come in, and
there was a tremendous amount of work that had been completed that nobody had seen. And still only recently have people had the benefit of being able to see all of the work. We were spending money, but we were getting a lot of stuff done.
Oh yeah, and like a lot of people don't know this, but I had started out with Tobias in September of 2015, and I came on board full time. Here's what I came on board full time to work on Nothing But Axanar in October of 2015. But before that, in September of 2015, I had started working with Tobias. I was writing these notes and taking pictures and sending him reference material. And I was directing the visual effects sequences, which is very different from what a normal movie does. A movie usually shoots the live action and does the visual effects sequences later, but I couldn't do anything else because the sets weren't done and we weren't ready to shoot. The script wasn't totally finished and we weren't cast. But I'm like, why waste time? I'll do the visual effects sequences, and because we have those, I would be able to match move the camera. We'd be able to do some really dynamic things by intercutting the live action photography that we were going to create with the visual effects sequences that were already finished to do some really innovative things, camera work. And I've been talking about this with Milton Santiago. I mean, he and I were shooting costume tests and paint swaths to see which paints worked best on the sets. I mean, we were doing a ton of work. So I had done this video, this sort of thank you to all. It was a thank you to all the donors, and it was showing how much work was being done. Jared Hunt was building Klingon mech-leths, for weapons.
Dean's work on the sets. I mean, not only was the bridge set being built, but the transporter room, the Klingon war room, Garth's quarters, and they were just gorgeous sets.
The Klingon bridge, the chairs and the consoles, and yeah, it was all getting done. And so I made this video. I think I released it on the 23rd of December, and then we got sued on the 30th of December. So it was after we were ramping up. We were all excited. The excitement was palpable. Going into the studio, we were getting ready to shoot, casting. It was all rushing forward, and we really were. We could have started shooting in about 30 days, because remember, we were only ever going to make. I thought we had enough money that we could have maybe pulled off the first 45 minutes, but we really were planning on making the first 30 minutes of the movie.
And the idea was that then we would use that first 30 minutes to fundraise the money you needed to complete the rest of the film.
Right. It was working. So it's ironic to me, like my memory of this was I made this video, and it's so celebratory about what we were doing, and everybody was so into it, and literally a week later, Christmas happens, and then a week later the lawsuit drops. And it was kind of a perfect encapsulation to me of what happened with Axanar, because all of us had the best intentions, and I just made this video. It'd be fun. I'd interviewed Tobias and Bill and everybody, and everybody was so excited, and we're all so happy and thanking everybody that made it possible. And then we get sued.
Well, and that's the thing. It's we were so happy because, as Rob said, it was getting done, man. It was getting done, and the money was being well spent, and there was a professional crew of people that were involved, and everybody knew what they were doing, and it was clicking along for about 2 months. It was unbelievable the amount of work that was getting accomplished in that period of time.
Yeah, it was astonishing. We didn't find out we got sued until we read it in the Hollywood Reporter.
We later found out that we got sued because CBS had seen the Vulcan scene, and they said that's too good. It's too good.
Yeah, it was really. I mean, I can't tell you how soul crushing it was, and we didn't know what was going to happen. But of course, for some people, it put them at the center of a firestorm that they thrived on, because it just gave them all the attention in the world. I wasn't one of those people.
Yeah, it really online it became, Alec kind of grabbed the pitchfork and took up the fight, and people who hated Axanar picked up their pitchforks and took up the fight, and Axanar supporters online who, the only knowledge they had about the project was online. Jonathan Lane is a perfect example. I mean, everybody dove in, and those of us who were actually working on it kind of sat back, and it's like, oh crap. And it was even more soul crushing because in that original lawsuit, there were all of these unnamed John Does.
Right.
And we knew it was us.
Right.
And that was, so it was just this period of like, oh God, like what the hell is going on? And what are we going to have to go through?
It's not like we had a leader who would stand up and rally us and reassure us that nothing was going to happen to us. I certainly couldn't do that because I wasn't the one being sued.
We also weren't being paid. We were mostly volunteers. I mean, there were some people who were getting paid on the project, the artists and makeup people and things, but mostly we were volunteering because of the potential of the project. And lots of people who had worked on Star Trek over the years were getting involved because they saw what the potential was for this thing. And it was just so much uncertainty. We had no idea, like, what was our legal obligation? What was it going to be? Were we all going to have to hire lawyers to defend ourselves? It was crazy.
And I just want to be clear. My deal was beginning in October of 2015, I was being paid $3,000 a month to direct and edit Axanar. And my deal was through the entirety of 2016, presumably that's how long it was going to take, I was to be paid that. That was the deal that was made with me. That deal was never honored because the money ran out and I stopped getting paid because we weren't actually making the movie. But that didn't mean that my deal should have gone away, although it did, which is very important. I want to go on record with that right now.
Well, and I wasn't paid at all to write the script. I was going to be paid a sum, just as like a thank you sum for thank you for doing the work. I was told that was going to happen, and that also never happened. I was actually a donor on the project. I originally donated $100 to the project, and I was given $50 to cover my travel costs to be on the Vulcan scene shoot, and so I'm out negative $50 for all my involvement in Axanar.
My girlfriend also is an Axanar donor. She also donated $100, and she has yet to receive her patches.
It's the whole thing is just it's I don't know. It's a little bit like Keystone Cops at that point.
This is something that people don't know. At the time, La La Land Records, my beloved La La Land Records. I love La La Land Records.
Here,
La La
here.
Land Records put out the box set of all of the original Star Trek music. They are a wonderful soundtrack label, a wonderful record label. They've done more between Lucas Kendall, his Film Score Monthly series, and La La Land Records. We've been getting some of the greatest soundtracks ever, the remastering jobs they're doing. I mean, La La Land Records has their unexpurgated Superman release with even more of John Williams' wonderful music. La La Land Records was going to release my movie, Free Enterprise, on Blu-ray. By the way, it's currently not on Blu-ray. I would have been able to oversee a new version, a new high-def version of Free Enterprise. They were also going to release a movie called The Specials that I was tangentially involved with. But they were going to release Free Enterprise. This was a done deal. It was signed. When the lawsuit hit, La La Land, who is a very, very good licensee of Paramount, they've put out all these great Star Trek records. The head of La La Land Records wrote a letter to John Van Citters saying, we were going to release Free Enterprise on Blu-ray. Can we still do that because of this lawsuit? Obviously, Robert Meyer Burnett was not named in the lawsuit, but he directed Free Enterprise. What should we do? The answer that came back from CBS was, you probably should not release Free Enterprise on Blu-ray. Free Enterprise is the only movie that I wrote and directed in my life. It currently does not exist on Blu-ray. I'm asked about it every day. What that would mean to my career professionally, having a new version of it that I could go in and fix, and what it would mean to the fan community and the people that have been asking me about a Free Enterprise Blu-ray for the last, 10 years, who knows how much that's worth. But because of the Axanar lawsuit, it does not exist. So if anybody wants to ask how I was affected personally or professionally, I can point to that. That was a huge blow to me, let me tell you.
Well, and I can tell you that, I mean, also, a union writer on a professional production would make quite a good deal of money, tens of thousands of dollars on a project like this. Non-union, I mean, I've gotten paid as a writer before and, made thousands of dollars for my work. So basically I did this for free, but, agreed to take just a small compensation for that. But potentially, my time was worth a lot as well. And, it is frustrating. It is what it is, but it's frustrating.
Yeah, and I think that, aside from the fact that I did not get paid for a year what I was supposed to get paid for, I'm always borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and I'm always doing multiple jobs. While working on Axanar, I cleared my plate. I wasn't looking for additional work because I knew that for that year I would make enough money to pay my rent and do whatever I needed to do. Well, that didn't happen. And suddenly, not only am I mired in a lawsuit, along with Alec. I mean, I suppose I could have just walked away, but I still clung to the hope that we would get to make this movie because for my mind, like I told you earlier, I wanted to make this damn movie. It was a dream project of mine. God, to make a Star Trek film, even though it was a fan film, I know that in the long run, I could have made something I could have pointed to for the rest of my life and said, I am damn proud of that. Plus, I felt an obligation to the donors. Yeah. People gave us over $1.5 million. I mean, here was the thing. We delivered Prelude. I delivered the Vulcan scene that was, but we hadn't delivered what we'd promised. And I'd never done that. And it was let's get this movie done. I mean, we owe thousands of people this movie. And the idea that doing a court case and this does nothing for anybody. And I am not interested in bread and circumstances or bread and circuses or pomp and circumstance. I wanted to film this movie. That was my sole desire, was to get this movie finished. Yeah, did I want to show what I could possibly do under these constraints? Absolutely.
Well, that's the thing is nobody was going to get rich. I mean, we weren't going to sell this thing and make a ton of money. That was never the motivation at all. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I also kept working, even after the lawsuit, kept working to polish the script so that at the very least the donors would have that. We could have easily delivered them digitally the script. So at the very least they'd have that, because one of the perks in the fundraising was, this beautiful hardbound copy of the script signed by Alec and myself. And yeah, I mean, it's like, I certainly felt an obligation to try to deliver something for the fans who had, paid for all this. But the idea that anyone was going to get rich making Axanar, that was preposterous. I mean, I've seen that said online.
And here's something else too. Everyone's like, you guys had a for-profit studio. Well, first of all, that we didn't have a for-profit anything. A studio, like, I understand if we had that facility to rent out to other people, we could have put it out on a paying basis. But a studio doesn't make profit really, or much profit. I mean, if you have 10 sound stages, you possibly could. But a studio makes money by making things and selling them. And so we basically had a converted warehouse that would have been, if the people I brought in to upgrade it to a live facility, we could have actually turned it into something great. But the studio, the place that we called it the studio, the place that we were shooting was only going to be taken care of by Axanar. If we wanted to stay there, we would have to find other ways of financing the property. And that was another thing that always irked me. Like, you have a for-profit studio. I'm like, what profit?
And the thing of it is any money that came in by renting it out to other people, that money would have gone, once it covered costs of like renting the studio, which would have zeroed out the cost to Axanar donors, that money would have gone right back into Axanar.
Right.
So, I mean, and, in my understanding, I mean, I wasn't involved at all with numbers or budgets or anything like that. But my understanding was that people, Axanar was just going to be given away. And if anybody, if CBS had come in and was interested in, that's interesting. It's like there was going to, just, okay, take it. There was no idea that like anyone was going to make money off of the IP. We were always making a fan film, but we wanted to make the best damn fan film we could have. And the point is that as we were going along, more and more professionals were getting involved, and people who had worked on Star Trek for years all wanted to contribute. And so the potential for what we could have created got bigger and bigger and better and better. We were always making a fan film, just to give it to the fans.
Yeah, and the reason, like, people are like, well, you shouldn't be getting a salary for a fan film. Well, no one was trying to do what we'd ever done before. I mean, the scope of what we were doing, I would have to work 24/7 for a year, and I was making just enough money to pay my bills and cover my expenses while I worked on this project. And by the way, when you crowdfund a movie, or when you crowdfund any project, if you look at any project that's been made, part of what the crowdfunding is to pay people to do work. The difference is that we were creating something based on an IP we didn't own. So that's where the problems arise. And that was apparent, but no one had ever sued. There had been lots of fan films made. Renegades raised a lot of money. Star Trek Continues was making money, and they were paying people. It's just we made a lot more money than most, and we were really vocal about it. I think one of the biggest mistakes in hindsight, what did I learn? Actually, I didn't learn anything, because I've always believed that the biggest lesson that I should have imparted to Alec, and this is a mistake that I made, was that you get the money and then you go make the movie and you release it. We shouldn't have talked any shit. We shouldn't have talked ourselves up. We should have shut the fuck up and gone to make our movie. And my advice to anybody who's working on a film project, everybody wants to put their names on the IMDb, so they have an IMDb page. Listen, man, my advice for all of you listeners out there who want to get involved in movies in any way, shape, or form, don't put up an IMDb page about your project until it is shot. Because once it's shot, it exists in some form. It doesn't matter. Don't put any information on the internet until your project is shot. Don't say shit about it, because you wind up like us. We talk mad shit on every podcast, on every convention. Wherever we went, we talked about how great we fucking were. And look what happened. It's a cautionary tale, my friends.
Yeah, I always thought that was a little ill-advised, the constant podcasts and the constant going out to conventions and like talking how great Axanar was. And at the same time, Paramount doesn't know what they're doing with Star Trek. They're not doing anything with it. What a shame. And it's like, But the upshot of it is that all the does got dragged into court depositions with CBS lawyers. Rob, myself, Diana Kingsbury, Christian Gossett, Alec was drawn. Alec was there. I think did Terry McIntosh. A few people got dragged in and had to go spend a couple days with the lawyers, and it was unpleasant. And it was a very nervous, tense time, and nobody knew how the axe would fall if it fell.
And I also want to say that, all of these people, we were all dragged into legal proceedings. And it's not like Alec, who was being sued, was very quick to give anybody reassurance of any kind. He had his pro bono lawyers working for him, but none of us did.
Right.
If there was ever a time, and it certainly wasn't lost on me, it was like I lost my job that I thought I had for the entirety of 2016. I lost my income. And now, what if I had to lawyer up? What if we were being sued? It could have destroyed lives. And this was something that we were thinking about all the time, and we were not being given reassurance by Alec. He thought he was David versus Goliath, and he was loving every minute of it.
Yeah, it was definitely a much more tense time for the Does than it was for Alec. I'm sure he would say otherwise, but he did have lawyers, and he did have. He sort of took to the challenge of the lawsuit, and the rest of us were like, oh shit, what's coming,
And no one would tell us. The information with the lawyers I was constantly asking Alec, what the hell's going on? And, he shared information selectively. And I was getting sued by my former employers. Well, the project was getting sued, and I was wondering if I'm going to be sued.
Right, because that was always the threat, that it was initially only Alec, but all of the unnamed Does could have been added to the lawsuit very easily at any time, and we didn't have any idea what was... it was a tense time, man. We were all freaked out. A lot of people were very freaked out. And it's like, for a fan film, you got to be kidding me. Like, how the hell did we get in this mess? So in terms of the CBS lawsuit, when the CBS lawsuit finally ended, like a year later, and the terms that were negotiated were that we could make 2 15-minute films, we had this big meeting, February of March of 2017. And Mike Bodwin, who's the PR kind of consultant for Axanar, flew out here. He got a space on his own dime at a hotel near the studio, and we had this big meeting to see, okay, how are we going to proceed?
Because we won.
Right.
We might not get to make a feature film, but we did win. We were not buried, and CBS actually allowed us to go ahead and make these 2 15-minute films. Right. Which, in my mind, was that was the greatest outcome I could possibly imagine, aside from being able to not. They were never going to let us make the feature film, but instead of being slapped down and go away, they told us to make 2 15-minute feature or 2 15-minute shorts, which to my mind was an epic win after the year that we'd spent. And I wanted to be like, great, let's go. We've got effects, we've got sets, we got studio, we got everything.
This is the key thing.
We just don't have Richard Hatch.
Right. So it was this meeting was myself, Rob, Alec, Mike Bodwin, Bing Bailey, Diana Kingsbury. I think Dean might have been there, Dean Newbury, and Bill Waters. And we're there in this room, and it's, okay, what are we going to do? We can make 2 15-minute films. What's the plan? And Rob and I hear it said online, well, Bill and Rob wanted to make the first 30 minutes of the script, but like all the fans wanted volume 2 and 3 of Prelude, the 4 Years War documentary. But here's the point. Everybody in that room at the time said, let's make the first 30 minutes of the film. And the reason for that was that we had done almost all the work. We'd spent 3 months in pre-production, so we had the script, we had the sets, we had the costumes, we had props. As Rob said, we had VFX. We had VFX, we had music. We didn't have Richard Hatch anymore, unfortunately, who had sadly passed away. But we could have, by the end of that month, gone into production. It would have taken us a few weeks to film. It's 2 15-minute films. It would have taken us not that long to film this stuff. A few months at the most. And maybe another month or 2 for post-production. And by the way, we could have used the soundstage that all of that money went into. We could have used that soundstage, and we would have had then all the sets that still existed at the time. There was every reason in the world to do that, because we could have done it. We could have done it quickly, and we could have delivered for the donors those 2 15-minute films. Everybody wanted to do that except Alec.
And if you go to my website, theburnettwork.net, you can actually download our script in its present form, in the form that we wanted to shoot.
Which, by the way, leaked all throughout the production, the various versions of the script, and all the legal documents, and all the stuff leaked all the time.
Yeah, and not by us. And in my mind, it's like we had all the materials. It would have looked epic. Like people would have been like, oh my God, this could have been so great. But we would have had an example of what it was we were able to do, which who knows if somebody saw that? What if CBS saw what we did and said, you know what? Go ahead and make the rest. I mean, they probably would have, because it would have interfered with whatever Star Trek Discovery was doing, because why did they decide to make a show about the Klingon War? I don't know.
Well,
but,
and the point was to show, like, what did we do all this for? Like, what was all the angst and all the worry about the lawsuit and all the hard work? It was a way to make sure that didn't get wasted and it wasn't for nothing. Right,
and that's any good producer worth their salt. I mean, this is how Roger Corman made movies. He would take what he had on hand and go make them. Even back to Ed Wood would get stock footage, and he would go make Plan 9 from outer space because one of his friends who worked at the studio had underwater footage of an octopus. And we had the stuff. We'd already made it all. We had all the costumes. It was all ready to go.
But Alec wanted to do, volumes 3 and 4 or 2 and 3 or whatever of the Prelude documentary. He wanted to, which is essentially to reset the entire project. And at that point, that's when people started to fall away. I mean, obviously Christian and his entire crew on Prelude fell away. Rob and I fell away. Mike Bodwin, Milton Santiago, Bing Bailey, Diana Dean, Aaron Harvey, Jared Hunt, Bill Waters, Curtis Short, Maury Altman. I mean, everybody just started falling away from the project, and ultimately there was no money anymore. So Alec had to then pack up the sets and move to Atlanta because he couldn't afford the huge rent on the soundstage. And then a bunch of the sets had to get trashed.
And we didn't move out of the soundstage until May of 2017. So we really could have shot there. Shot there, and we really could have done it, and we would have had something to show. We're now talking. We're doing this podcast at the downside of February of 2019. Well, this is 2 years since we had that meeting.
Right.
2 years, and nothing's happened.
And here's the interesting thing about that. In that time, in that 2 years, Rob, you've edited, 2 or 3 films and delivered like a 50-hour documentary series. I've written a 140,000-word science fiction novel I'm pitching. It's like, we've been all doing work since then.
Yeah, I mean, I just turned over the feature film Tango Shalom that I've been producing, and I'm also editing and post-supervising. I just turned over the turnover of all the sound files to our sound design team. And the short film, ironically, I edited another crowd-funded short science fiction film that Tobias Richter and his team at the Lightworks did 100 shots for. So, we crowdfunded this science fiction film that Lucas Kendall wrote and directed and produced. At my behest, Lucas hired Tobias, and it's done. We do the final mix on Tuesday, and it's finished. So, in addition to my entire involvement with directing Axanar, from the time I came on board to direct Axanar, I edited, in addition to the Axanar work I was doing, I edited 3 feature films. Paradox, which is on Netflix, a movie called I Know Where Lizzie Is that was on Lifetime, and now Tango Shalom, the movie that I've been producing and editing. That's also going to get finished. And
which Tobias also worked on, correct?
Yeah, that Tobias did shots for the feature. Yes, he did. He did a really cool digital matte painting of the Promised Land and a shot where Moses gets struck by lightning. And Alex Bornstein is scored Paradox. Alex Bornstein, who scored Prelude, and he wrote 2 pieces of music for the Axanar feature. I got Alex Bornstein. Not only did he score a movie that I edited, he scored a couple more movies for those producers. So the team that was working on Axanar, everybody has done incredible work since then. Where are those 2 15-minute films?
About that, I have one quick question, because we know then that after the lawsuit it had to be 2 by 15 minutes. What kind of running time were you imagining for the Axanar you originally set out to make?
About 110 minutes would be the feature. It would be like the script, but it would probably, I always thought it'd be about 110 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Yeah.
But so then the idea is that we could have shot the first 30 minutes of the film, broken it up into 2 15-minute pieces and delivered it. So, if you watch them back to back, you would have the first 30 minutes of the film completed, and it would have been a perfect way to show the donors and to show everybody, because by this point, Axanar was headline like news in the film world, in the geek world. People were talking about it. We could have shown everyone what we were trying to do. And it would have been a way to use all the assets we had and make sure all of that money and all that work didn't get wasted. And I think that's the most frustrating thing for me is like, you think about what could have been and how many had different choices been made. We could have shown everybody.
And also the public perception, if we had actually finished the first 30 minutes, people would have been like, wow, those guys really did something cool. And it would have been a great postscript. Everyone would have said, without a doubt, Paramount was dumb to sue these guys. It would have been one of the great too bad stories, because we would have shown what we could have done. Everybody's money would have been up there on the screen.
Yeah.
And nobody would still be asking themselves after 2 years. The story would be like, these guys put up a great fight and look what they did.
It would have been an opportunity to have a mic drop. And as Rob said, every single dollar that the donors had contributed would have been on display on the screen.
It's 2 years later and there's nothing. All that's been released from Axanar are my 50-minute documentaries of the VFX that keep getting cut apart and put up on the Axanar YouTube page as if they did them. I made my 50-minute documentaries open sourced. Let's say somebody wanted to show that they still had something going on. I made my documentaries available for anybody who wanted to. Say somebody who was once producing Axanar could have downloaded those and put them up on their own page as Axanar product, because that's what they are. But isn't that funny that even the impresario of Axanar won't take work that was done for him and put it up? He can have it, but he doesn't, which is strange.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is unfortunate. I mean, and I was friends with Alec before this, and I still consider him a friend, and I have no ill will. And I hope they make the two 15-minute films. I really hope they do, and I hope it's great, and I hope the fans and the donors are thrilled, and I really hope it goes off. The whole problem of Axanar for me is just the aggravation that was unnecessary, and the angst of the lawsuit, and the lost opportunity to really take advantage of all of that money and all that goodwill and all of that talent. And it felt like it was just squandered, and it was an amazing opportunity, and it was pooched through no fault of our own.
Well, and to be honest, I feel the same way. I mean, I don't bear Alec Peters any ill will. I really don't. I thought it was interesting that he got Paul Jenkins, who is a phenomenal comic book writer, who I actually knew a little bit back in the day, got Paul Jenkins involved in rewriting these two 15-minute scripts, and I wanted to see what they came up with.
Yeah, me too.
I still do. I'm like, well, if they're going to make two 15-minute movies, that's cool. I mean, now it would be a way for me to sit back and look and see, what are they going to do? I mean, I'd love to see Paul Jenkins direct this and write it and turn it into something really neat. And I was actually, when I was told that Paul Jenkins was coming on board, I'm like, oh, all right. Well, now I'm interested to see what's up.
Yeah,
let's make that movie, because when I resigned from the project in November of 2017, I sent Alec a letter of resignation. It was because I knew that I was still holding out hope that we could still do the 30 minutes.
Yeah,
honestly. And then when that was no longer the case, I'm like, no matter how good the two 15-minute movies are, they would always be compared to Prelude to Axanar, because they would be following in the format of Prelude to Axanar, unless they did something wildly different than I wasn't aware of. I wanted to see something new. I wanted to see something that would blow me away. But why just copy what you've already done simply because, well, I want to see the Battle of Axanar? Well, yeah.
Well, and my frustration too was like, so after Rob was gone, my thought is, okay, I'm going to put a last polish on this script and deliver it so that at least that can be given to the fans, so that, look, we can't make the Axanar film, we're going to go in a different direction, but here at least is the script for you, enjoy, and then we'll have our two 15-minute films show up. But then I delivered the script and it was like, okay, thanks, bye. And it's like, that's never been, that was never officially released to the donors. And it's like, so I just kind of fell away from this thing too. And what's been frustrating since is to see now, I also have no ill will toward, any of the Axa Monitor or Jonathan Lane or any of the Fan Film Factor or any of that. But it was frustrating throughout the whole process of pre-production and the lawsuit to see everything we were doing mischaracterized by the people who hated Axanar. And it's been equally frustrating to see so much of what we did and what our intentions were and the work that we did be mischaracterized by Jonathan Lane on Fan Film Factor. And and I'm sure he has very good intentions with what he's doing, trying to promote Axanar, but he wasn't there. None of those people were there. Like, they weren't there during Prelude. They weren't there during the production. They weren't there during the lawsuit. And it's only after all that stuff blew up that Jonathan kind of got involved, and now he fancies himself part of Team Axanar, I guess. But it's like, I've read so many things that just are completely mischaracterized about my involvement or Rob's involvement, and again, it's like, this is all in the context of all of that hard work we did. None of it was ever officially released. So like, the donors still officially haven't ever seen the script I wrote. They still haven't officially, seen all the VFX footage. I mean, as Rob said, now they're kind of recutting Rob's documentaries and putting them on the Axanar channel. But all that work was never seen, and it's like, it's just crazy.
That's why, like, the Axamonitor people, I was so angry about what they were doing, because I had worked so hard. I mean, remember, my involvement with this project goes all the way back to the first half of 2014, and Prelude went off without a hitch, and it's so great and celebrated. Millions of people have watched it and enjoyed it. Even to this day, it gets comments. And what I can't stand now is, I did work. There's nothing that came out of Axanar other than the first Kickstarter video, which, when I wasn't involved, when they raised the initial money to make Prelude to Axanar, everything else that came out of that, I made. I finished. When I said I wasn't the only one who made Prelude, but I finished it. I worked on the Prelude to Axanar film for 2.5 months. I mean, physically worked on it. They shot it for 2 days, but I worked on it for 2.5 months. And then I produced a whole Blu-ray for Prelude, where I went and did new interviews with Alec and Christian to celebrate. I didn't put myself on that Blu-ray, recording audio commentary. And then I did, how many videos did I did? How much stuff did I shoot? I mean, I've shot so much material for this project, and I worked so hard on all of this stuff. And I'm the only one that was pushing the actual film forward. Even when we were being sued, I made teaser videos of our visual effects. I went and recorded Richard Hatch doing voiceover for this trailer. J.G. Hertzler recorded VO for a trailer I made during the lawsuit, which I released. I mean, there's so much work, and now the very person that I was working for is coming after me a second time, and he's now characterizing me as a thief and a liar. So I read this, I'm like, this is amazing to me. This is amazing to me that I did all of this work, and at the end of the day, that's why I released those 3 videos. I wanted people to see that this work has been done. And here's the thought that went behind it. That's why I'm talking to you guys on this podcast, because the truth will come out and the truth will set you free. And I thought, after going through a year of legal proceedings and a few months of legal proceedings last year, needless, that it would be done. But oh no, it's striking to me. I'll just keep releasing material that I worked on and made.
It's just, the whole thing is unfortunate. It just didn't have to turn out this way. And I hope they make the 2 15-minute films. It's like, through this entire process, I have kept completely silent about. I just have kept my head down and not talked about it. But it has been very frustrating to see my involvement, Rob's involvement, other people's involvement get completely mischaracterized again and again and again and again by people who weren't there. And yet we still feel an obligation to all the donors who gave us money. I mean, I feel a tremendous obligation to they deserve something for their money. I mean, I think that's why we were all in it. I mean, that's why we were all doing it.
I mean, what people don't remember is there's a number of donors. One of them sent me an email exchange they had with Alec today that put $10,000 each into this product or this project. $10,000. Now, I don't care who you are. $10,000 is a lot of money for an individual to cough up for a fan film. And I don't see that those people have been well served, and they deserve something. And I've received a lot of emails from people that have watched the documentary pieces, and they've thanked me profusely. Oh my God, I had no idea that this much thought and this much work had been done. And I'm like, it strikes me as strange that why wouldn't you want people to know that? How come that stuff wasn't put out immediately? If you're not going to make the feature film, then everything that I did is moot. So why not put it out? Why not put it out officially?
Here's the frustration. And Rob and I have talked about this before. Is it's not hard to make 2 15-minute films. I mean, it's just not hard. Within a couple of months, you can write, shoot, pull together a cast and crew. If you've got people who know what they're doing, you can get it done. And we certainly gave it the best shot we had. That's for sure. But it's it's like, look, nothing else would matter if there were 2 15-minute films out that the donors had that they could see, whatever they were. But it's 2 years later, and it's a shame.
I mean, in 2017 and 2018, I created a lecture series which was shot with 4 cameras on a stage and out in the wilds. It's 50 hours long. And
Shot,
I did it,
edited, delivered.
Yes, I directed it, produced it, shot it, edited, production designed, and it's delivered. You can get it online at crisismedicine.com, and it's worth taking. It's incredible. And by the way, I've generated all this sitting at this table that I'm talking to you at now. Well, I'll tell you a perfect example of what a competent, great film producer would do. So say you've got 2 of your lead actors that you're paying for to come to an event that you're putting on, right? You've got them coming to your studio. Now, those same actors who were in Prelude, they can sit down in a chair. You've already got your script. So all you need is a green screen. You get 2 cameras and, lights, and you shoot these actors. Of course, one of them would need makeup because he's a Vulcan. But you're in Atlanta where all the Marvel movies are made. I'm sure there's some makeup people locally. And you shoot those people and bank their footage. So you've got 2 15-minute movies that you have to make. You've got 2 of your lead actors in your facility in Atlanta.
The truth is, you don't even have to shoot them on a green screen. You could just put them on the bridge set and just say, like, it's now a historical. It's the ship is now a historical museum, and you shoot them there if your budget is that tight. It's like, why wouldn't you're paying the actors to be there for a convention? Why wouldn't you shoot them?
I mean, it boggles my mind. And then you could make a trailer with that. A teaser trailer, do something.
Yeah, I don't know. The whole thing is just it's puzzling and unfortunate and frustrating. And when I was done with this, I said to myself, all right, getting involved in a fan film was a mistake in the first place, and I kind of felt it in the very beginning. But it's like, I'm going to go write my own novel and my own work now and put it out into the world. Which is, the novel is called Only Those Who Risk. It's 140,000 words. I'm pitching it to.
It's fucking great, dude. It's really, really good.
I appreciate that. It's first of a series. I'm pitching it to agents. The response has been pretty good so far. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's like, at least I've got something that I've created myself that I own, that is my intellectual property, that I can put out into the world and not have to worry about any of the other BS. And it's just, the whole thing is just, it's been a learning experience, a frustrating, it's a cautionary tale. But everybody who was involved, man, I can speak for a lot of people. I think everybody had the very best of intentions and really put their best work into it in a very frustrating circumstance. And for a couple months, it was terrific, man. For a couple months, as Rob said, it was getting done. It was amazing.
But there's interesting things afoot, and you never know what might happen. I will say that.
Yeah, I have a feeling we may be talking about this some more down the road, especially if you guys are open to that possibility, of course.
Oh,
yeah.
I think so.
Oh, sure, absolutely. And I would love to. I would love to have a few months from now watch the 2 15-minute films and wow, look, they did a great job. Isn't that great? Donors are happy and yay! It wasn't all for naught. That'd be swell.
It'd be cool. I'd watch it.
Yeah, me too.
I might even give it a like on YouTube. In life, you have to decide what's important to yourself and what do you want to leave as a legacy to the world. And I've always believed that what I'd like to think that I've tried to bring to the world is the work that I've done and the positivity that I tend to bring to people around me and to the projects that I do. And that's what I was hoping. That's certainly how I began working on the Axanar project. When I started on Prelude to Axanar, it was a joyous, wonderful experience. for everybody involved. I had a wonderful time, and I'm incredibly proud and honored that I was included as part of that production team. And I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
Yeah, and I have to look back and say, as frustrating as it all was and has been, it's like my friendship with Rob has never been stronger. It was a blast to work with him, and continues to be a blast to work with him on stuff. Getting to know, Bing Bailey and Diana Kingsbury and Mike Bodwin, the friendships and the experience, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been tremendous, and so it is what it is. You live and learn, and you move on, and good things come of it regardless.
Yeah, and I think my only real regret is that the work didn't get done.
Yeah.
That there is no film to watch, and I did what I can. I did what I could by putting out material that the donors paid for, and that I worked so hard to create with Tobias Richter. And there's more to come, by the way, more to come. And I'm happy that the people will finally get to see it. And I'm really glad that Alec is able to take that work and put it on his own YouTube channel, and that's good. At least there's some value in it, I suppose.
Yeah, and like I said, I hope he makes those two 15-minute films, because I'd like to see them. I wish him and the new Team Axanar, I guess it's Team Axanar 3.0 or 4.0 now, I wish them all well.
Me too.
All right. Well, it's been an incredible honor to speak to you both. Here's to more, hopefully, in the future, and it's been a wonderful conversation with you today, and enlightening in a lot of ways as well.
Well, thanks for having us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a blast. I'm glad we could do it, and yeah.
I concur with that. It's been a pleasure to have you on, gentlemen.
Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, why not subscribe and click the bell icon for all the latest content, and be sure to check out our other videos. And if you really like the channel, why not consider supporting us on Patreon? Patreon supporters get all kinds of bonus exclusives, and you can support the channel for as little as $1 a month. You can also check out our sister channel, Midnight's Edge After Dark, for live streams, discussions, and more. Stay tuned, because another video is coming right up.